Hello Templars, welcome back to my office. And it's been an interesting week. I've managed to cut my hand severely on the lid of a tin of dog food. That took skill, I can assure you. I also managed to severely injure my wrist because I was digging in the garden and I found a lump of granite about that size under some soil. So I happily swung my spade in and severely compressed this joint, which is now damn painful. Hey ho, these things are sent to try us, and I've got too many things on just now to be able to stop and worry about it. Because, for example, tomorrow I'm doing a pop-up submissions. Now this is an interesting little fun game. There's an agent who runs these pop-up submissions in London, and what he does is he invites aspiring authors to send in their manuscripts, or the first few pages of it, and a complete synopsis of the story. And then he has an actor, or I think some of his staff at the agency, read through and recorded on audio, read out the sections that have been sent in to him. And he invites an author, me sometimes, and other people to sit in over a video Zoom conversation, and we analyse that book, and then the author and the other people say whether we think it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or possibly with a bit of work. And it's a fun thing. We normally have 5 submissions to get through, so if you're interested in that, it'll be today, Sunday, at 5 o'clock on pop-up submissions on YouTube. Just do a search on YouTube, you'll find it. Then next week, Saturday, at 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be involved with a festival called Skullduggery at Stowmarket. Interesting name. Actually, I'll put a link to pop-up submissions and to Skullduggery down at the in the comments section of this video, so you can see it if you want. But that should be fun. And usually, of course, I would go along to a literary festival. I was supposed to be going to Skullduggery last year. It had taken 3 years to organise for me to be able to get there, because publishers being tight-fisted and so on, there was never enough money around for me to go. But last year, at last, it was arranged, booked, everything was sorted, and then of course COVID hit and it was cancelled. So instead I gave a 1-hour conversation which was recorded, I think, on YouTube for them, just a Q&A. This year it's going to be a more in-depth question and answer session with Janet Pattle, who's a delightful lady from Stowmarket, interviewing me. And then the day after they're going to be doing something similar but with Simon Brett. If you don't manage to make mine at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, I would thoroughly recommend listening to Simon's. He's a fascinating guy. He's a lovely bloke. He started off writing because he was working at the BBC and I think just got bored with producing things on the BBC. So he was doing things like he did the initial, I've forgotten what you call it, but with TV and radio you'll often find that there's a one programme made and it's only done to see what an audience would think of it. And he was the guy who did the initial thing for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, as well as he did a lot of the Dorothy L. Sayers, Lord Peter Wimsey shows for the radio on Radio 4. But he left the BBC many years ago, having done the initial programme, whatever you call it, for the Hitchhiker's Guide, and went on to start writing novels, and he's written over 100 now. So a stunningly prolific author. He's written more than twice the number that I've managed. But he's also a thoroughly nice bloke. He used to be the president of the Detection Club, which is really how I got to know him rather well. Anyway, that's all up next weekend. There's been other interesting things happening on the good side recently, which is that I've been asked to go to a casting session with a TV show that's planned. There's a company which I have had some involvement with. I'm just trying to find their name now, which is called Past Preservers. And Past Preservers are basically a casting agency for television programs that are going to do programs like Time Team and similar things. And they will go and hunt for experts of whatever type that a TV program needs. And one thing they're looking for right now apparently is a presenter for a sort of a cold case review series, where they want to have someone who's a novelist, who's got experience of different types of crime story, as well as a number of other people. They want researchers and other people to get on it as well. So I've been asked if I'd like to try a video casting for this, which it'll be fun, so I'm going to do that. I'm used to doing video conversations with myself, so doing it for a casting agency really isn't a great problem for me. So that'll be interesting. It'd be fun if that did come off. I've also been getting a lot more reviews in for One Last Dance Before I Die, which is my Shanghai series. The first in my Shanghai series, I should say. No idea if I'm going to find a publisher for it yet. However, I've had some really good positive comments from Michael Ridpath, Ian Rankin, Peter Lovesey and Angus Donald. So their comments are going with the manuscript to a number of editors before too long, and with luck my agent certainly feels much more confident with this that she'll be able to get a deal. I also had to write a bit of an author's note to go with it, and the reason for that, it hadn't occurred to me, because the trouble is, if you're an author, you start writing about a subject, you're going to review and research that subject really in depth. Now, I've been working on Shanghai, this potential series, for probably 4 or 5 years now. I think I started my first bits of research 4 to 5 years ago. And the main thing was this, Empire Made Me by Robert Bickers. And it's a really, it says on the front, a fascinating and dispassionate portrait of how the British Empire kept afloat for so long. Well, it's not really about the British Empire at all. Shanghai was never part of the empire. It was always an individual international settlement. It was run by the municipal council, the Shanghai Municipal Council. And the police were the Shanghai Municipal Police, the SMP. But the Shanghai Municipal Police were only for the international settlement in the middle of Shanghai. Didn't include, for example, all of the outer perimeter that was Chinese. There, Chinese law prevailed. It didn't include the French settlement, which was sort of a lump on the south of the main part of the international part of Shanghai. But the trouble is, you do this research, and say I started that one about 4 years ago, and then you write these books with all the people and the detail that you've got and send it off, and you hope that someone's going to be interested in that, and they'll pick up on the fact you've used lots of local characters and things, and that will help you get a contract. But of course the trouble is, the people reading the book have never seen all of that research, and they don't know that Gracie Gale wasn't just a prostitute or madam of a brothel that I invented. They don't know that she was a real lady. Lady in inverted. They don't know that Dan Fairbairn was the Fairbairn of Fairbairn and Sykes, the man who invented the commando dagger for Churchill, the man who trained the commandos, trained the OSS, trained the SOE, left after the Second World War to move to America, where he trained CIA operatives. I mean, this guy was a fascinating character, and an SMP policeman. But people haven't heard of him anymore, and they don't know that Du Yusheng was pretty much the Al Capone of Shanghai for the time. He was a genuine, real character. So it struck me, because no one seems to know about all these people, it would be a very good idea if I added something about them. So I've written an author's note. It's only 2.5, 3 pages. And I think what I'll do is I'll put it in here too, so you've got a view of what the story's about, or at least who the characters are in it. And I'll add a few of the comments from Angus Donald and Michael Ridpath as an example, just so you've got a view for, or you've got an impression of how other people perceive this book. Because I think it could be a very strong, successful book. But it's all in the lap of editors, and editors don't like old farts like me in their 60s writing books. They prefer to find the next new young thing. I used to be a young thing, you know. It was a long time ago. I have had problems with research before. There was one classic case where a book of mine was rejected, and it was really painful, that one, because I had high hopes of it. It was using a new character who was a modern day, present day that is, artist. I thought that's interesting, because I find it tedious when you find authors writing about authors as their lead protagonists. It's understandable because authors know how authors live, they know what sort of people they are because it's about themselves. But I've always thought that writing about your own type of life is a little bit tedious for an audience, so I prefer to write about other types of character, and I thought an artist would be an interesting private investigator type. Unintentional perhaps, but I thought an artist would be someone who is used to looking at faces and understanding the personality behind the face and seeing things that other people don't. He's going to be observant and interested. I thought that would make him an excellent investigator. And so I had this idea, which is based on a local guy here who committed suicide after embezzling a lot of money, committing fraud on a massive scale, and hurting an awful lot of people in this area, but also elsewhere. He was a true, he was certainly had psychopathic tendencies. He didn't understand other people at all, or didn't care at all about anybody else. And I thought that was quite an interesting story, because I always had the belief that actually it was unlikely that he blew his own head off. It's more likely he had upset someone and taken their money, and so someone got the revenge. An interesting little tale, I thought. And then I started looking into it, and I had this book written, and part of the story was that this guy was spotted walking into a barn. There was a bang. Next time somebody went in there, they discovered that his head was blown off. Obviously he was unrecognisable, but it was the same clothes, so it was obviously the same bloke. It was rejected for one reason, and that was the editorial assistant said, well, there's no way, obviously, in the present day that somebody would not have DNA testing. Now, that was interesting and wrong, because I had checked it with a local guy from the special branch. I'd checked it with 2 local police officers who are detective constables, and they categorically told me that the body would not have been tested because it's expensive getting DNA tests done, and if a guy was spotted walking into a barn and then a body was found with those clothes on, it would be assumed that that was the same person, especially if there were certain corroborative aspects. So that I found interesting, a little bit irritating, but also quite endearing. That book will probably turn up at some point in a cheap ebook store near you, because I've written the book. It's a perfectly good book. I might just as well get it out and see if people will buy it. And that's about it. The only other thing I've got to report is that my blasted computer that I spent £500 on last year getting updated with new memory and new storage has started going wrong again. It's every day, at least once a day, it will fall over and stop and have to be rebooted. Regularly it seems to be having some sort of fault that means that it dies and then completely messes up my external hard drive, which is used for all my backups. It gets an error 92 from Apple. It says that that's gone. So as things stand, this blasted machine is now proving to be a real pain. I've got a sneaking suspicion that my £500 was completely wasted, and I'm going to have to invest another 2,000 quid to replace it with the latest Okie Kokie 2000 Apple machine, which is not something I wanted to do. It's not something I planned to do this year. I've got a barn that's falling down that we need to rebuild. I've got a very damp wall at the back of the house because the soil has built up alongside the wall, and I wanted to put a land drain in there, and a number of other things. But life happens, doesn't it? So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for your patronage, which is making a big difference, especially with computer purchases and so on. And thanks for your continuing support. And just now, I think I'd better go edit this so it's ready for tomorrow. Cheers, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.